Hi guys, afternoon. I think it's just about 10 past 2, so I'll make a start. Before I get into who I am, quick show of hands. Who's using any end-user computing products from VMware here? Okay. So I'm guessing Horizon, AirWatch, anybody? A couple people using, not many. Okay. Oh, somebody over here. Okay. And for the rest of you, are you using competitors' products, or are you not really into end-user computing, but you thought you'd come here to understand what we're doing? Just so I can level set what's going on in terms of where I pitch this at, right? Because I can go low, or we can keep it kind of wherever. We'll see how it goes. We've got about an hour, so I've got some demos lined up as well. I'll try to keep it a bit interactive. Does anybody know me? Number one. Because I've been around the block for a while. Yeah, apart from what it says on the... Oh, no, but you do know me. Okay, that's good. Without looking at that. Cool, okay. Now, the only reason I asked that is because then it means I can use all my jokes that I normally use, and then you won't say I've heard them all before. No, it's not that. No, I've been around for about 8.5 years at VMware. I came from Symantec originally. Before that, I came from Bank of New York. So my life in IT has been since, well, actually, believe it or not, I started work on some mainframe stuff back in the day. And then I did a load of work around desktop management. Bank of New York rolled out Windows 2000 for a subsector of it. And then I went to Symantec, looked after Ghost. Some of you may remember some of that. And a little-known product called Live State Delivery. That used to be called On-Command CCM, which nobody knows. There's anybody that, oh, whoa. Okay, so normally I don't talk about that one. So Live State Delivery, by the way, used to be called LSD for short, which was quite funny. So the usual one was, don't come here, it's a wasted trip. But yeah, yeah. There's others, but we'll do that after a beer. Anyway, so joined VMware, and quickly after about, I say, a year, because I thought I'd get rid of desktops, and after a year, this thing called VDI came about. So I've been with VMware 8.5 years, so pretty much 7.5 years, virtualized desktops came around. And of course, I tried to hide in the background because I thought I got rid of desktops. However, kicking and screaming, I got into it, and now I'm kind of looking after what we call the end-user computing practice. So what that means from a VMware perspective is some of the pre-sales guys and also the PSO guys, the services guys that go and deliver and implement the solutions. I've got like a community rolled over those. So pretty much live and breathe end-user computing is, I guess, the background. So a couple of things I thought I'd do today. You tell me if they're relevant or not. If I see everybody nodding off, I know it's probably not relevant. What I thought I'd do is a real quick, and I mean really quick, 3-4 slides on what is it that VMware sees in the market, some things that are going on that I think are relevant, some convergence in terms of Windows 10, and I'll get into that in a second because that's the big thing going on in the market at the moment. It was really critical to what we're doing in end-user computing, or should I say business mobility now, because we're starting to turn into that. It's kind of integrating the AirWatch side as well as the traditional end-user computing side. I'll do a real quick what the product is at the moment, the portfolio. I will give you a quick update on what's new because we released Horizon 6.2 recently. There is actually an online technology forum I'm doing a session on coming up with some more detail in there. But I'll go through some of the new stuff in Horizon 6.2. And if we get time at the end, definitely try and do a demo. And also try and touch on some of the new things roadmap-wise within reason of what I'm allowed to say, although I tend to say a lot. So. And my usual joke is I've got loads of slides and this will be death by PowerPoint, but it will be the quickest death. So, yeah. Sometimes that works. Right, so really quickly then, we're changing this term, right? We used to be called end-user computing, used to be called desktop management. It's all about now what we call business mobility. It is not, by the way, just about these things. Although they're important, it's about helping customers change processes they used to do manually or in, let's say, older ways of doing it, making them more mobile, changing the way they go out to business, changing the way that people internally in departments are working through IT. So from our perspective, it's enabling people to do different stuff, but mobilizing processes or going out in more innovative ways to market. That's the kind of key message here. So yes, tech is important in terms of the device stuff, but actually it's helping businesses change what they do, transforming. And you may have seen this slide. I think Joe may use this a couple of times. I think this got used quite a bit at VMworld as well. So I kind of come from that area there. I won't, deny this. I just about got away from the mainframe era, although I did start off life there. And I did a lot of work around what you traditionally know, the PC client-server era. I guess what most people are looking into is getting into this piece now, both from the server side, or data center side, cloud side, but also from the desktop stroke mobile side. And I get this feeling that everybody thinks this is nirvana here. This is like the promised land, right? And I think a lot of people want to get there, but the point being, from our perspective, both from server side as well as desktop side, is you're not going to get rid of that. That's going to be a long time hanging around, just like mainframes still are. You know, the PC, the desktop, the way of delivering applications, everything that went along with that I've lived and breathed for 15, 20 years, that's going to take a long time to go. However, you're still going to have to manage both at the same time. So what you see with our products today is your traditional horizon, which I don't want to say the word legacy, but VDI, application delivery, publish apps, all of that stuff that we've known and loved for a long time. How do I take the best out of that, but also marry it with the new world, and then also allow people to go into this world and still access the old world? That's really what we're trying to do. Yes, we have kind of separate products today that are being integrated. There is integration already. But longer term, we want to see this as one platform. The users don't really care, and you guys from IT don't really care either. And I sometimes make the joke that it's so hard that some people end up jumping off that bridge halfway through the world. So we're here to help you guys and customers get across. The big thing that I'm seeing at the moment, hopefully you're aware of this. I grew up knowing GPOs. Right, that's what I did. So anybody who's done desktop management loves the word GPO or hates it, depending on where you come from. But the point being is, pretty much everything we did is around GPOs, yeah? You join the domain, you get your PC up and running, you maybe ghost it, all of that stuff there. Then you actually join the domain and you set policies to your machine. That world has just been thrown on its head, because with Windows 10, you can now do everything you used to do with a GPO, you can do in a lightweight EMM-style policy management that you can with AirWatch. Why is that important? Because now it means that your Windows 10 machine is pretty much a glorified big phone in terms of how you manage it, right? Now, interestingly, Windows 10 still allows you to do it the classic way, if that's what you want to call it, and also the new way. But there's a bit of a pivotal moment in the industry where actually some of the new guys on the block can go and manage a Windows 10 just like they would do a phone. Because there's a lot of people from the AirWatch side, for instance, that are reasonably new to the industry, and they know lots about phones, and I know lots about desktops, right? And it's kind of how those two merge. But the interesting thing is Windows 10. So if you're not seeing this already, I don't know if anybody's considering Windows 10. Anybody doing that? Have you thought about maybe changing the way you manage it, right? Because for, Microsoft, Intune, etc., we'd like to believe that AirWatch is the best way, obviously, talking from a VMware perspective. But today, for the first chance ever, we can manage it like a phone. And it's going to have real big impact on how we do policy control and manage these things going forward. So we need another cheesy trap line here. Forget that bit in the middle. The point here, though, is we think we've got some stuff we can bring into the mobile world, and then also some stuff in terms of policy control, management, etc., you can take from the mobile world back into the desktop world. So did you hear anything around the announcement called A Squared at VMworld? Did anyone hear about that? A couple of things. I will touch on it later on if we get time, but the point being here is that actually we can do some desktop delivery stuff via mobile to Windows 10, so the best of both worlds. I'll get into more detail on that. In terms of devices, I've got some there. It's kind of irrelevant really to us. The device is just something we need to manage in order to get apps and data down. So the point here is that actually we don't really care what the underlying device is. AirWatch, if you hadn't known, pretty much manages any type of device, ruggedized devices, smartphones, PDAs, laptops. It's pretty much everything Macs, etc., which is really important for us because it allows us to have a policy control, if you like, at the underlying machine level, and that's really so that we can deliver services to it. The bit tying it together is something that we used to call Workspace, that we now called VMware Identity Manager. If anybody aware of that, it used to be called Workspace Portal. We've renamed it, and there's some reasons why we've done that, specifically around AirWatch as well. So without going through every single bit, all I'm putting this up for, apart from I will call out some major pieces in here, is if I go back, I'd probably start over that in where the wall is. Like 2007 was when I joined VMware. The answer, if we were to come into customers, was VDI, what's the question? Right? That's all we did, let's be honest. I can say that now because we have other things in the portfolio. But if we were to come to you, yeah, you want VDI. VDI is the answer for everything, unless you don't have a connection, of course. And then we tried to do some stuff around not having a connection, like offline desktops and ACE, if anybody ever remembers that. But actually, the world, as we see it today, is not just about VDI. So everything you've seen in terms of acquisitions, new products, etc., like 1.5 billion, I think AirWatch was, quite significant. Largest one we've ever done at VMware. It's all about making sure we can cover pretty much every use case. So if you're sitting there thinking, why are they buying all this stuff? Is there a bigger plan? Yes, there is. And the ultimate plan is that you can pretty much do everything from VMware, use case-wise, that you used to be able to do from other traditional methods and or point solutions. So there shouldn't really be something we can't deal with now. I'm sure there might be, and you guys can come up to me and tell me one specifically, but we're pretty much plugging all the gaps. So 2013, we bought a company called Destone. Do you know Desktop as a Service platform? We released Horizon 6, where we became competitive with the other big player in the market you might have heard of, beginning with C and ending with X. We bought AirWatch, obviously. The big one, if you haven't seen it recently, well, I say recently, it's about a year ago now, it's Cloud Volumes. We renamed App Volumes. That's pretty cool, actually, just from a pure geeky tech fest. If you ever played around with that, that's like me going back when I first joined VMware and I was demoing Tetris and doing vMotions. Right, and everybody was like, wow, that's amazing. If you see App Volumes in terms of how it actually does this, it's a pretty cool demo, so hopefully I can show you that later on. But other than just being a cool demo, lots of interest in that. So real-time delivery of applications to VDI workloads and also RDSH servers and physical now, which is kind of what we announced with A². So that's the big one here. Recently, we've done 6.2, and I'll give you an update of Horizon 6.2. There's been lots of other stuff in the way in terms of now the market actually perceives VMware as not just being a VDI player, but actually the leader in end-user computing. So it's all good stuff from VMware. Hopefully we don't need to tell you how wonderful we are anymore. We can get on to the actually what's going on. But the good news for us is I spent the last 7 years competing against other players. It's nice now to get to the end of it and actually have a pretty much compelling, if not differentiating solution against those guys. So nice for us in that sense. So current portfolio then, we have what we call the Workspace Suite. Have you seen this? You can now buy in one place Workspace Suite that includes traditional Horizon Suite, so the Enterprise Suite, and you can get the Mobile Suite, which is the orange edition, the top level of AirWatch, and you get the content, so it's part of AirWatch content, but the point being here is that you've got desktop, mobile, and content that spans, so you can obviously replicate files, data for users across different platforms. The bit that ties it together is what we call identity management. That's your single sign-on engine. That's the workspace portal as was, but in effect, it's the thing that's fronting both the desktop and also the mobile side. So from a user perspective, they go into what they see a portal, they see apps, they see data. That may go off to the desktop side of the house. It may go off to the AirWatch side. It's the bit that's trying to integrate them together, and there's lots of integration ongoing there. It's already integrated, but you're going to see more. And in the OneCloud bit is just a generic sign for SDDC. So in other words, yes, this is our traditional vSphere side. This stuff sits on top. And we believe there's a better integrated message. But that's kind of what you've got today. If you want to go out and buy this stuff, it's called a Workspace Suite. If you haven't seen the portal, again, I can show you this. The idea here is that users just see the whole, everything they get to do in terms of applications. And we don't really care, or they shouldn't care. I don't know if you can see that at the back. The idea is you have an app catalog style, so you can go in there, request applications. You can get some workflow approvals in with third-party tools if you need to. Custom brand it. You can deliver both Citrix apps, I said the word, virtual apps, published apps, VDI desktops from us. You can get FinApps, which is our virtual applications, Windows. You can get SaaS applications. The point being is the users shouldn't really care. All they do is they go there, whatever the device is, they just should see a portal, if you like. Now, there are some people that talk about the fact that maybe that shouldn't sit in a portal, should sit on the device, and it should be native. You can kind of do both, but our point here is pretty much everything now has got a browser, so you should be able to deliver applications across. The important thing from the back end is we're kind of understanding what the underlying device is, so therefore we can do some determination as to which way you deliver the app, or indeed if you even show the app in the first place. It's kind of the idea. Does that make sense? Has anybody seen that in action? I can show you that later on, just as a quick if you haven't seen it. Because that is really what we're doing here. So from a, let me just move this, because that's right in the middle, isn't it? Oh well. Doesn't look like I can. I think it's because of that light. Oh well, whatever. Yeah, so what we're trying to do with Identity Manager, though, even though it's Workspace Portal, so the users can see their apps, the other thing about it is single sign-on. So they use this scenario of everyone's got a big set of keys. I've got like 39 passwords for PayPal, banks, email addresses and all that good stuff. The same thing in enterprise. There's a lot of applications with differing authentication engines, different ways of logging on, usernames, passwords. They're not completely federated. The point of Identity Manager is really to give everybody one big key and then allow them SaaS application access, single sign-on, application access from mobile apps, and also Windows apps. So it's one big key, if you like. So it's not just app access, but it's also single sign-on, and something we're calling adaptive access. So the point of that is, depending on who you are, where you are, policy, device, whether it's enrolled, whether it has a certificate, things that you can go and interrogate the machine or the user on. If you meet that criteria, you get access to a certain set of apps. Or maybe you get access to one, but actually you can't go full access to it. You just get the front screen or something. So it depends on where you're coming in from, depends on the device. We can even do some clever integration now with NSX that some people may or may not have already tried. I'll talk about that later on. So, knowing if you're coming in externally, tagging it, and then effectively you can't then get access internally to certain applications if you're coming in through, say, VDI, or if you're coming in through the mobile access gateway from AirWatch. So we can do some clever things on the fly for a remote external access. Without boring you through all the bits here, though, I kind of went into this. Yes, every device is pretty much a given here. This bit on the right-hand side is interesting, though, because what we're seeing now is changes in terms of not just the fact that it's Windows 10 is changing things. We're seeing people now not doing that standard corporate device. Seeing it, everyone's heard of Bring Your Own, but we're also seeing COPE. You heard of the word COPE? So corporately owned, personally enabled. I'm not sure if I like that. It could have come from America, but anyway. So point being here, though, is that you don't necessarily give everybody a device and that's it. They could actually have their own device and then have corporate assets on it. Or you could say, this is the corporate device. You get to choose which one you want. And there's bits on it you can do for personal. And then we'll reserve some stuff that's actually for corporate assets. So why is that important? Well, we think actually with AirWatch and the combination of Horizon, we can kind of deliver both of those scenarios. So there isn't really, in terms of work styles, something that we can't do now. There's always going to be the odd one or two, but the major use cases you can now cover with AirWatch. And if you haven't seen this as well, I kind of like this with Secure Content Locker. So the idea here is, most people have got lots of different repositories. I'm guessing you may have this. You may have Box, Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, SharePoint, home drives, SMB shares, whatever it may be. Lots of repositories for data. And then you come in and you get another Dropbox-like application, and it's another repository, yeah? So the idea of a Secure Content Locker is you front the whole thing up. Applications can actually read directly into this SDK and an API provided, so they think they're writing to one location, and actually we're kind of masking that at the back end here. So they could go off to the personal content store, they could go off to OneDrive, Box, or whatever. But from a user's perspective, they see one place. They go to one place, see all their folders in one place, and all their repositories. So they can get access to that remotely or through a desktop. It's pretty cool, because it's not just another repository, because I think a lot of people just do that, don't they? So if you haven't seen that, I can show you that later on. I think my scenario is just a home drive folder and some internal group shares. But it gives you an idea of how you can see your personal stuff plus group stuff at the same time through one place. So that's kind of the AirWatch side, just high level. I'm not going to go through every single one of these pieces here, but this is getting down into Horizon. So Horizon's come on. It used to just be VDI, it's not. Horizon Suite covers physical, it covers virtual, app publishing, app delivery, app remoting, bare metal restores. But if you put all that technology together, the main kind of use cases are here. The traditional main office, which is a bit of a VDI stalwart. It's the classic scenario. Remote office, if you have connectivity, is your scenario for maybe VDI and app publishing. We're also doing a lot on point of sale. So if anybody's in retail, we've got a lot of large customers now doing POS update, image updates using Mirage. So they typically use SCCM to do that, but they had issues with distribution points and kind of saturating the WAN. So what we can now do with the what was WAN over, if anybody's using Mirage here, we can now do updates to POS devices. So we've got some large retailers that you may or may not have heard of that are using this to do all updates to all their till devices, as well as some of the back-end stuff. And the big one, which until recently I kind of questioned if it was a big use case, Linux. Not just for developer use cases for actually developing code on, but also at the same time for things like high-end graphics. So we've done a lot of work with Horizon 6.2 around NVIDIA, and also with AMD now, for kind of high graphical use cases. So I did show recently at the Defense User Group, they're using virtual battle space. You've seen virtual battle space? I should show it really, because it's basically, it's like Call of Duty, but actually what the military use. I am allowed to say that because it's on YouTube, so it's all external. But they test all the soldiers, so they have Apache helicopters coming, jeeps and tanks and stuff. That's all simulated on virtual graphics, and we're doing a lot of work with people that can't be mentioned, but you can probably guess who they may or may not be, where they can host this stuff. Linux with 4 different screens coming around with high-end graphics to simulate all these virtual battle spaces. So for me, that's pretty cool because it's VDI that we really wanted to do a long time ago, but nobody could ever do VDI with high-end graphics. Pretty much all that stuff's gone now, and there isn't really a use case you can't do with VDI unless you don't have a connection. So can't get around the laws of science on that one. Non-employee is Flex. So have you heard of Flex? Actually, I've got a real quick small demo at the end where I show MS-DOS. I showed it to some of the guys that were in the round table. But the idea here is it's ACE, but I shouldn't say that. Assured computing for those who have been around. But offline desktop, and you've got Fusion, in effect, or Player, Type 2 hypervisor, and you have a policy engine that's backing that up, and you can deliver it down to contractors, basically a Type 2 hypervisor, and you can put control around it. So you can do wipe, restrictions, encryption, you can lock down the network device, copy and paste, different devices, USB control, all of that good stuff. That's pretty cool. It used to be what ACE was, but then ACE was a little bit before its time. So it's been reinvented, it's come out as Flex, and you can use Mirage to manage the image within it or whatever you're already doing. I'll show you a quick demo at the end. Yeah. So, kind of a half gone into this. The bit that you probably want to be aware of here, and I will show this, is around app volumes. That's the cool bit. That's the bit that everyone's changing to. So, if anybody's done app virtualization, anybody done that before? Right. Did you ever fully get every single application ever virtualized? So you always had that 10, 15, 20%, COM plus objects, shell extensions, kernel mode drivers, the stuff that AppVirt can't do. Well, AppVirt was never really designed to do that. It's just in the absence of anything else, we all jumped on AppV and FinApp. Hopefully you all jumped on FinApp. Yeah? No? Oh, okay. Well, so we've jumped on FinApp to separate the apps away from the OS. Yeah? So you get your clean image, virtualize the apps, you put your profile on top. Problem is, we couldn't virtualize everything. So we're like, okay, what do we do with the 20%? So we ended up sticking them back in the core image, which then defeated the object of what we were trying to do in the first place. So with app volumes, what you can now do is get native install-like deployment, but you also get separation away from the OS. So you can still have your clean image, still deliver your apps, and only for those problematic apps do you use FinApp or AppV if you really wanted to. Because really, virtualization for apps was about coexistence, separating apps away from other apps that didn't play nicely together. But we decided to go, oh, that's really cool, let's virtualize every single app. Why did we do that? Because we all liked MSIs, and everybody did everything with MSIs, and I thought, well, I want one packaging methodology. So if I'm going to do it here, I want to do it for everything, because then I have a single way of deploying. And then we got into all these issues about we can't virtualize everything. So right now, I guess, the desktop world's in a bit of a, we got really complicated for our own good sometimes. We've gone down this route of trying to fix everything with one solution. We never quite, and we end up buying another point solution to fix the 20% we could never do with the first one. So hopefully we've got a solution now that doesn't do everything, but combination of that plus FinApp and some of the other tools, we can cover most of them. So I'll show you that in a second as well. And the reason we're doing this is because of this whole non-persistent, persistent thing. So if you haven't heard of non-persistent in desktop terminology, it's all about, or I used to call it stateless desktop. So the idea is you do have your golden image. When I was at Bank of New York, I got it down to 2 images. I had one for a laptop and one for the PCs. But the only reason I could do that is because I pretty much knew what the PC types were, and I knew what the laptop types were. And I used to spend most of my life updating Intel 845 chipset drivers and all the new stuff. But to keep my golden image up to date, my image got bigger and bigger with all these PMP devices and that. With stateless desktop, our scenario here is to get to that nirvana when nothing's in the core image, only the things that need to be in, like the core image itself, the service packs, any patches, utilities, everything else you separate out. You do that with app volumes. You use FinApp for virtualization to separate the apps that don't play well together. And then I'll get onto this in a sec, but UEM, our profile management tool, that's the bit that does all the customization for the apps on top. The bit underneath, though, we can do quite a few ways. So we've always been able to do a non-persistent desktop with Composer. Composer is our way of cloning desktops VDI-wise. Now we're going to go down this route of what we call instant clone, next generation view Composer. So we mentioned this at VMware about 1.5 years ago. We're almost there in terms of having this delivered, GA. And the idea is that you take your live running VM, you do VM fork process on there, you do some customization at the guest level in terms of the VM, and you can spin up lots of desktops really, really quickly. Why is that important? Because then, if any of you have done a recompose operation, anybody done that over a weekend? Depending on your storage, etc., you can get that all done or not. With this method, we're kind of going for the, well, you don't really care because you can spin up so many desktops, you can instantly clone them, you can get all of that patching methodology and all of that quick update, you can get to this true stateless. And the only way you can do that is if you've got a way of separating all the apps away, which now we think we've got. So where is this going to? This is what VDI should have been 2 years, 3 years, possibly even 6 years ago. So it's trying to get it down to the point where it potentially is cheaper than a desktop, physical desktop. That's where we're going. Yeah, some of you may be thinking, well, he's talked about this new mobile cloud era and he's talking about VDI. Well, what we're trying to do here is make everything we used to do as good as possible and then also allow you to get into this mobile world. So if you're thinking I'm concentrating a little bit on that, it is important because eventually we're going to take down and take it to the mobile world. And I'll talk about where App Volumes plays in the physical and Windows 10 world. That kind of makes sense? Have you seen this before? No? So this bit is a bit of an illustration in terms of what App Volumes does here. So if you imagine your traditional virtual machine, I say traditional, could be physical as well, same kind of concept. But the idea is you have your OS, you have your apps. And your apps are so kind of embedded with the OS, that's why you virtualize them. What you can now do with App Volumes is you can still get the same embeddedness, but you don't have to deliver it at logon time in terms of all the apps get installed and all the registry keys and all the system files get updated. You attach, in effect, a VMDK file at the vSphere level at the back end. So we have a write filter driver that sits in the operating system. So it's an agent sitting there listening. And what happens at vSphere, the App Volumes Manager will go and, in effect, attach these VMDK files with apps in them. We call them app stacks. The write filter driver sees these disks being attached at the vSphere level. It then interprets them in Disk Manager in Windows. Then that merges all the file system and the registry together and instantly see all these applications appear. Which sounds kind of like, well, so what, right? I can kind of maybe do that before. When you see it live, and you imagine doing a massive patch to 30,000 desktops where you want to update a single application, to do that using a traditional MSI-based deployment model could take you months. Now you can kind of do that in minutes and hours. So it's a real game changer in terms of how you do it. The other thing, though, it's not just Windows in terms of desktop, it's also RDSH servers. So we've got a load of guys, that did XenApp for a long time, or RDSH-based deployments. How you then also deliver applications to that estate is really important. So most of our big customers going down this route at the moment have got big legacy Citrix estates, and they're using App Volumes to deliver applications out to RDSH servers, which then they publish on top. So the good news about this is you're not locked into Horizon. If you really must go with the other one, you can also use it as well. And the other thing that makes it really, I would call, persistent, even though it's non-persistent. So the desktop itself is non-persistent, but if you install something, if you have it to reboot and then get rid of everything, you've lost all your installs. So the point of App Volumes is you have what we call a user-writable disk. Same thing, VMDK file gets attached to the back end, but it's per user. If they install anything, the changes get hived off to the user disk. If you then get rid of the OS, when they log back on, the disk gets reattached, their Visio Basic, Studio Plus, or whatever it is, gets reinstalled automatically, and they don't see any changes. So the point being for them is they get stateless in terms of the OS, which is what IT have always wanted, but the user gets persistence. So it's kind of a different way of doing it, but everyone's into this at the moment. I can show you that later on as well. That makes sense? It's a bit of a game changer. This one isn't really a game changer, but it was something we needed to do. So we bought a company called Amidio about February timeframe this year. We've renamed it User Environment Manager. And the real reason for it is persona management, what we have in the product today. I don't know if you know persona. Jokingly, I sometimes call it non-persona. No, that joke didn't work either, right? Okay, so we've enhanced it, let's put it that way, right? So now what we're doing is we can do application settings, and we can do that not just at logon, but we can do it at time of application launch. Why is that important? Well, if you've got a stateless desktop, you deliver the apps, you can now do in-flight updating in terms of application settings at launch time. And when you compare this, because a lot of people are thinking, there's other people out there, three-letter names from Netherlands and people based in Manchester that do this, been doing this for a long time. This is a lightweight version of that. So it's not a big back-end database, client-server infrastructure. It's a very elegant solution, sits on DFS shares, sits on the domain controller, very lightweight in terms of the config. So it's just like zip files that contain the application settings. It's not replicating big folders and folder redirection. You still need that. This is just application settings, but you can do some real good stuff in terms of quick logons, customizing the application's default settings and that. Put that all together, you get your OS being delivered really quick, you get your apps being delivered, user changes also being stored, and then application settings being delivered. So you get this stateless desktop effect. Think of it as a big set of Lego that we're assembling on the fly and doing it really quickly and changing it. So it's just really getting VDI to be what it should have been a long time ago, that I spent 7 years trying to architect around for customers, when if we had this technology then we could have done it a bit better. And it should work across physical and virtual. That's quite important. Cloud, forget that for the time being, only in the fact that it's a virtual desktop in the cloud. We can do this on physical, it doesn't really matter, or RDSH. So it's virtual and also physical as well. It doesn't really matter from our perspective. I did touch on Flex. It's probably better to show you the demo of this, but as I said, it's basically workstation stroke player with policy control around it. The key use case is bring your own contractor. They turn up, day one, you don't give them a laptop, you give them a virtual machine with policy, and as soon as they leave, you wipe that image. So it's just back-end policy control. And then from the back-end perspective, you probably already know this, but we've got VROPs. VROPs now pretty much extends across the whole piece. So the idea here is, I put all this infrastructure in, I now want to monitor that, and VROPs has got specific plugins, specifically for VDI, specifically for the end-user computing products. And this bit at the back, that's the back-end console for what we call Identity Manager. It's just kind of showing you what that looks like. The only difference here, guys, that I think is important is you've got choices now of how you deploy that. Now, in the old days, I say the old days when I first joined, it was on-prem, it was Horizon, that was your only option. The reason why we bought the DAS product, which was Destone, was we wanted to do what we called a cloud DAS, desktop as a service model. You can do that through a DAS provider, or you can do it through something called Horizon Air. So all really Horizon Air is everything you know and love from on-prem Horizon, done in the cloud, you buy it from us or a provider, subscription base, $50 or whatever it may be per month, per desktop. I pluck that figure out the air, it may not be that, by the way. And you can have a gold, silver, advanced, or whatever it may be. It's just literally VDI in the cloud or published applications that you rent, and you can have the workspace manager or IDM, Identity Manager in the cloud as well. So we've got two options now. That's all it really means to you. There is no real difference. There's a couple of things that do and don't work in the same way, I would say. But other than that, pretty much all the functionality is the same. So all it really comes down to is, do I want this, or do I want to deploy it myself, or do I want to rent it or somebody else to do it for me? That's really the only discussion. Once you're bought into the concept what you're trying to do, it's just a deployment option, really. We're just trying to make it simple there. Did you know that, by the way? Has anybody seen Horizon Air? No? It's just VDI, really. It's quite boring to show, if I'm being totally honest with you. It's just a desktop in the cloud. The point, though, but that's exactly the point, which is you don't really need to worry about it. Somebody else is doing for it, it's just a desktop. The clever bit, I guess, is the underlying infrastructure, but that's the bit we mask from you, should I say. Right, so Horizon 6.2, for those that have known it for a long I'm going to list off a load of new features. I'll be really quick about it, though, because I think they're important. We've done a lot of work around RDSH. What does that mean? I mentioned the other people in this market, but we constantly get asked, well, they've got this, and they have serial support for this, and they have copy, paste, they have better, there's lots of that. So what we've done with 6.2, we've fixed a load of what we think are feature gaps between other players in the market. Cloud pod architecture is when you have multiple sites. We've done some enhancements in terms of scalability there. Common criteria is basically, so you've got regulators. I don't know if any of you are in the secure space here, anybody? So you know what common criteria is? No, maybe not. People that need government type assurances with different levels of security, it's now certified for that. We also do pass-through now for AMD. So we do it with NVIDIA, so we had VDGA, direct graphics access in terms of NVIDIA cards that you put into a server, VMs punch a hole directly through using pass-through. We've also got Grid, which is sharing of the NVIDIA card, and we can pass that through to the desktop. We can now do, not Grid-like, but we can do AMD pass-through now, so direct access. This one's a small one, but I think it's really important. One-way AD trusts. You'd really have to know about how Horizon's installed, but the idea there is maybe your connection broker's sitting on a different domain, you've got multiple desktops in different domains, they haven't got trust relationships between each other, and especially with a connection broker, so you don't get single sign-on. So it's really important in security separation. But the idea then is that you just need an account sitting in one of the the domains that's not fully a two-way trust. You have your connection broker sitting else, and as long as you've got two account names and they've got permissions, you can then do single sign-on between the two. It's a small thing, and it took a long time to get in. I've been asking for it for 5 years, by the way. But actually, it's a real big use case for us now. Another small one that I quite like, because I've used it a lot, streamline pull create. All that is if you've got lots of pools of desktops, normally you have to manually go through each one. You can now just copy it, right-click, and duplicate it and go through. It's a really small, like, why didn't they think of that before? But it just makes it a whole lot easier. This bit down the bottom, it says enhanced licensing information. We slightly changed some of the licensing rules. There's a better dashboard, basically, so it's nothing too big. It's probably more for us than you, but it is in there. The big thing, though, that you may or may not be was access point. Anybody heard of that? So, without illustrating this too badly, right now, you've got something like 7 different gateways if you buy end-user computing from us. You've got the Mirage gateway, you've got the security server, you need a reverse proxy for VIDM, you need to sit that so it's got access remotely as well. You've got the mobile access gateway, you've got the secure tunnel from other products in terms of, I think there's some couple other ones with AirWatch that you need for app VPN, etc. and secure content. So there's lots of different ways externally you need to punch a hole through. We're consolidating them all. We've already done this for Horizon Air. Horizon 6.2's just got it now, and eventually over time all of the gateway type products that you'd need for external access will get integrated in. So that's new. It doesn't mean we got rid of security server. It's still there, but longer over time, we're going to consolidate. So what it means is when you come in, you want to deploy all the solution, you don't have to have multiple different things. It's just an easier way of deploying that. Big thing as well, although I haven't seen anybody take this up yet, but we now support all flash on the vSAN arrays. So we get asked that before. Now I'm not saying that it's all free, but at least we support it now. So we get the slightly different version that's got the mix node with spinning disk as well in Horizon Advanced, but now you can go for the all flash because it wasn't supported before. So we've done some changes there. And we can also now do stretch cluster support for vSAN. So that's if you've got some scenarios where you've got active passive. You've got to be a little bit careful here because the connection brokers, how they're clustered. But from the underlying storage, we can do some replication now, and we can support stretch clusters in terms of where your desktops live. You could have an active scenario or active passive. Big use case, they just need to do some tweaks from the connection broker so you can get a true DR scenario. This bit down here which says enhanced UEM integration, it probably means nothing unless you know what that is. What that is we can now do some clever stuff before you log on. So when a user logs on through Horizon, we can do some stuff before they've actually got a desktop. So we can do some checks, we can change things, so we can do some context awareness. So if a user's coming in from X, Y, and Z, change this application setting, or maybe lock down USB, or maybe change, I don't know, PC over IP settings, as an example. So there's some things you can do before the log on. So that's been integrated in now with Horizon. And a load of other stuff. Have you heard of CART? Is anybody aware of? We love our internal names. This stands for Client Agent Release Train. So what it is when we do an update of Horizon, we do a tick-tock type. So one major release and then a smaller release, typically. Sometimes we change that, but typically it's tick-tock. Then we have client and the agent, and they sit in the virtual desktop and how you connect from. They, if we was to wait for the major releases, wouldn't get updated until every year. So what we now do is we pretty much do these every 3 months. And what it means is we can put new features in that's separate from the broker into the client and the agent. So last time we did it, we did a load of stuff here. We did file type association with RDSH. So if I get a Word document, just click on the doc and it will automatically open up the publish app. FinPrint, we've done some specific things around static naming. So when you're moving from a VM to another VM, or you're remotely connecting from a different location, you may want the printer name to stay the same. Small things like that that got enhanced. This one should be a lot bigger than what it is Windows 10 support. Obviously, that's a very big thing. But that's out of the box now. OS X El Capitan support, that's from the client side. And we do a load of things around client redirection. All in all, that means that, I mean, there's loads planned for the next one as well. It's just a constant updating. This will never end, really. But we're very quick in innovating this. Because if you go back like 9 months, we were quite basic in terms of our published apps, especially in terms of our competition. So a lot's going on with Horizon. Are you all still awake? Am I talking too quick? I told you it would be death by PowerPoint, but the fastest death you've ever had. Some other things you should be aware of. NVIDIA support for Linux. I haven't got a slide on that specifically in a minute. Some other stuff around guest support. So 4K now, Ultra HD. Lots of people already going into that. You wouldn't believe, though, how much you need to think about it. Because shipping 1080p across a wire is quite interesting. on low bandwidth, you start doing 4K, you need to really think about your bandwidth concerns, right? So 56K probably isn't going to cut the mustard now, especially if it's got haze in front of it. MS Link, Skype for Business. Another thing we keep getting asked for, we need link support with VDI. That's been, we've got it for VDI, I think it was like 6-9 months ago. Now we've got it for RDSH. So just publish applications that have link support. So you need the link plugin from Microsoft to make this work. And it doesn't necessarily work on other machines that aren't Windows, i.e. if you're coming in from a thin client that's not XP embedded or thin PC, Windows 7 and above, you can't do it from Linux, you can't do it from a Mac. You have to have the Microsoft plugin, right? So because we often get asked that. And that is pretty much it in terms of Horizon 6.2. I think Horizon 6.2 should have been called 7 personally, but the powers of B have made it 6.2. Linux desktop here. Anybody got a requirement for this? Because like I say, up until 6 years ago, when I first heard about this, I thought all it really is people trying to get away from Microsoft licensing. They just want to have something to go up to Microsoft and say, I'm going to go Linux, I'm going to go Linux VDI. However, we are seeing a lot of use cases, high-end graphics, some of the high-end CAD type applications need this, and a lot of work in universities and that I'm seeing for this. But the key point is it's just direct pass-through, and now we're doing grid support as well. So all the benefits you used to get with NVIDIA Grid, you can now do with Linux as well. So some large petroleum type companies also need big Linux boxes with some high computational stuff. Have you ever, now I don't know how much you guys know about NSX, but one thing we're seeing more and more is, so I spent 6 years architecting what it looks like for external access if you're coming in through VDI, and some of the guys at AirWatch have been the same in terms of access through the MAG, the Mobile Access Gateway. They've been doing a lot of work architecting around what DMZ looks like, how you separate off segments on the network, who gets access, who doesn't. It's quite big to do that. You can do it, and there's a lot of best practices. The idea here now is why don't we take NSX, and then when you come in externally, apply a profile and a tag in effect, and say this is come in from an external bit. All the packets are there tags, therefore when they go in internally, they get automatically a profile or a firewall put around the VM or the virtual desktop or the application server. So the idea is rather than having to go off and architect a whole segment that's completely isolated off, you can do this on the fly. So there's inbuilt integration in with the NSX piece in terms of profiling. So quite cool on the VDI one for microsegmentation, but even better on the mobile access gateway. So from an AirWatch perspective, if you've got one of these things, normally you have a device level VPN, right? So you put in, I don't know, I won't mention the names, but a VPN. That pretty much means most people, if they develop an app that could piggyback off it, can use the whole attack surface of the whole phone to then get in. And once you're inside, if you've not done any clever architecting underneath, you can kind of jump off anywhere. So the idea here, obviously, is to micro-segment that, but use the NSX policies. So the kind of representation is you come in on your mobile app, AirWatch controlled, obviously. We know that there's a policy on AirWatch, and actually if you go into NSX, you'll see there's a drop-down box, and in AirWatch there's also one where it says there's an NSX policy. If that NSX policy matches a certain type, so it could be I come in externally, I come in internally, you can then get it to go off to different places. So this one here is we know the device, he's coming in externally, he's trusted, he can go somewhere. This one's unenrolled, it's not locked down, it's not got a certificate on there in effect, it's not controlled by AirWatch. Therefore, when you come in, you can do certain stuff, but you can only go to one bit. So it's just a kind of like a nice way of segmenting on the fly, which is kind of hard to do if you try to do that manually. Anyone looked at that? I think we've got some customers today that came up to me and talked about that. So if I can find them in a second, you'll be able to see that. I might even be able to talk to you. So I think I've done 40 minutes. I think this runs till what, 3:10, right? Is it time for a demo? Are you still all awake? And hopefully you're not all downloading stuff at this point so I can actually show you something. Because, yeah, 4K screens aren't going to cut the mustard either. Right, so a couple of things I thought might be good here. I took the liberty of customizing the access. So this is the identity manager. So the idea is, all being well, it's all completely customizable. It took like 5 minutes to do this. Front-end wise, you can just put in two-factor authentication. But for me, I'm quite old school here, so I'm just going to put in standard, and I can't actually spell or type. Once you're in, the idea here is you see all those apps. not quite, that's quite a bright screen there, isn't it? But yeah, so this is just the workspace piece. Now the interesting thing here is based on who they are, what the device is and that, you can change what's in here. The user can also say, actually, I don't like this, and they can move it all around. So it's all like HTML. This becomes their logical landing place, whatever the device is. And then in here, you can launch a broken phone. No, we're good. Interesting. Right, so in here, you can launch a desktop, standard way. You could have done this through Horizon anyway, but obviously you can front-end this. You get to see whether it's accessible or not. You can also do it via browser or a Horizon client. I'll just do a browser for the time being. While that's loading up in a second, I'll show you that. Also, you can front-end Citrix as well. So if you've already got an existing Citrix estate and you're taking time to move off, maybe you want to keep it running in parallel, you can also do that at the same time. Classic Salesforce scenario, and the scenario here is you do single sign-on. So the user logs in once, Salesforce has got its own back-end directory and that, so you don't really want to have to prompt username and password. So we use SAML to do SSO. I don't know if anybody's aware of SAML and how you do authentication with SAML artifacts, but that's all built into the product there. And then you could launch AirWatch in this case, or we can do publish applications. So this one's Word. Again, you can publish that in the browser or not. So from a user's perspective, they can go in here, and if they don't have an app, in this case I could have Notepad, boring one, I know, but they can just go in and request that. At the back end though, you could get that to call off to some other internal process, some kind of approval process. We've got a basic one built in, but you might want it to go to, I don't know, ServiceNow, BMC Patrol, whatever it is that you're using in terms of help desk ticketing or some kind of service request. And we're also doing quite a lot now with VRA. So there are some plugins you can do with the vRealize automation suite. We've got some customers already doing some fancy automation in terms of do that automates, goes off to somewhere, goes and buys a required license, sends an email to somebody who says yes, it comes back, and then so you can do some clever stuff with that already. So that's the desktop. Believe it or not, that's a HTML desktop. It's all in the browser, no client required there, no ActiveX plugins or anything like that. It's just pure HTML5. If you haven't seen this before, you get a screen on the right-hand side here, and you can call up other bits. I've got PowerPoint here, but the idea is you can now publish desktops in there as well as applications. So just PowerPoint just happens to be through a browser. But the key bit here, I guess, is you don't have to have a client as such. If you do want a client, you get a better performance, but you've probably seen some of this before in that regard. The only thing I did want to show you here, because I think it's quite a cool demo then, is that's my Windows desktop here. If I go into C drive, this is the before and after show basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you app volumes now. And one of the things when you demo it is you see a lot of icons appear on a desktop, but the only thing about that is, well, anybody can put shortcuts onto a desktop. That's kind of like a known entity. So what I'm going to show you is how you could quickly attach these app stacks, and you'll see the whole system file registry all merged together. So all being well, if it's kept it, if I go to the app volumes console, make sure this just still connected. Okay, so these here are my app stacks. You can't see those, I don't think, unless you're in the front row, but the idea here is you've got FinApp, you've got vSphere Client 5.5, Visio 2013, they're app stacks. Now app stacks can have one or many apps in there, depending on how you want to do it, because the natural kind of thing to do would be I want one app stack per app. That may or may not be the right way. And interestingly, you're still limited with attaching disk at the vSphere level, right? So you can't go over 60 disks. And in practice, we've seen performance start to degrade once you go past 25, 30. So you need to consider this. So why is that important? Because you can't have every single app singly. You need to think about that. You may have departmental apps, right? So there are some underlying vSphere constraints you need to be aware of. This one here is a good one, though, because it's got 19 apps. So under there, trust me on this, but that's 19 apps. I got things like 7-zip, FileZilla, Call Solutions, TugZip, which always makes me chuckle a little bit there. So if I go back into here, though, and say assign, the idea is you can do it on a user or you can do it to a group. So if you did it to a group, that's fine, the whole, as you can imagine, Active Directory groups. You can also do it to a physical machine, or you can do it to a virtual machine, or you can do it to an RDSH server. So if you put it into a group here, then the difference being user, it would do it in terms of only that user logging on. RDSH obviously it goes to the system. So anybody logging onto that would get it, but that's the point of RDSH because you want to share those apps anyway. If I go into this user, this is called Horizon, user 1 I think it's called, search for that, that does a lookup on Active Directory, it says that the user's logged on because it knows that I've logged onto that machine. And the cool bit here, when you say assign, you get the option, for demo's sake, I'm going to go for immediately, but in production I wouldn't do that really, especially on lots of users, because otherwise you're going to see a lot of apps and a very hot help desk call very quickly. So all being well, I say assign here. If I were to show you vSphere at the back end, you'd see, in effect, a load of data stores being accessed, the VMDK file being mounted, the virtual machines suddenly getting an extra disk attached. And then what happens now is you'll see, all being well, I did test this beforehand, but there's an agent sitting in there, it's waiting, and it's going to see that disk attach, and then suddenly all of those apps are going to be deployed. So fingers crossed, if I've done this correctly, and I'm hoping I have, it's normally pretty instant, but demo's sake is going to just make me, no, come on. Come on. Anyone got any jokes while I wait for that? It should be pretty instant. Normally it's about 2-3 seconds. It's just the time that vSphere is taking in the background to mount it and the agent to kick in. But purely because I'm doing this in front of you lot, it's going to not do it clearly. Come on. Oh, see, look, there we go. It's doing it. Oh, finally. It's my home lab, guys, so, you know, that's how I do it. If I don't build it, and I don't feel comfortable talking about it. But here we go. You can see that the file system now, all the folders have been instantly added. And if I go back to here, it's not updated it yet, but if I do a refresh, you'll now see that all those apps are installed, right? That's pretty cool, I think. And then, of course, the best bit about this, which is a self-cleaning up demo, is you can give as quickly as you can take away. So if you say unassign, so you can imagine the scenario, you do an update, it's Monday morning, you do your virtual desktops, you get all your apps there, you get a phone call, and then you can pretty much say immediately here, obviously if you did log off, and then very quickly, it should be quicker afterwards, but the idea then is that all disappears. But you can see now why the OS is completely separated away, right? So there you go, back to normal. And if you refresh all of this, yeah. So that's my vMotion moment I used to do with Tetris when everyone was like, wow. There's supposed to be a round of applause at that point as well, for my home lab. Yeah. Question, yeah, sorry.
What would happen if someone was running an application and you unassigned it? Would it just crack the app?
Depends if the app needs disk access or where it's running. So FileZilla, interestingly, just completely runs in memory most of the time. So that's why you don't want to be doing it when they're logged on for that reason. So it's great for a demo, even if it does take 5 seconds longer than what I thought. But you would really want to log off in reality. Because, yeah, suddenly things have gone, right? But you can do that, but it's, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
How about accessing shared storage?
In what sense? Explain what you mean.
Many users, they need to access shared file server.
Right.
You map it to all desktops.
So the file system, what they need to get access to is independent of this. So what this is in effect is you're getting a VMDK file and you're sharing it amongst lots of different people. So the benefits are you get like reduced storage because you only got one app that's been shared. So it's a little bit like link clones but for apps. But if you want to access something separately, to your point, that's just standard. You do that without using app stacks or app volumes. That's not really related to app volumes at all. Is that making sense? So if you need files, so in my scenario here, as an example, if I go to my drive, like I've got a shared drive, that's my Horizon user's got a home drive there. Yeah, I've got a system disposable, that's where all the page file and dump files go. The persistent data disk is where the profile would have been, if you want to do that. C drive is just the native C drive. That stuff is independent. When we do the attach, we're just basically merging the C drive, in effect. So it's kind of independent of any access to any other shared storage or anything like that. Architecturally, at the back end, you do need to think about storage requirements. So it sounds really cool, adding a load of apps there. But if everybody's hitting those apps, you do need to think about read I/O and all the things from the background in terms of your storage and the performance, etc. But we've got lots of ways of showing you how that scales and that. There's lots of white papers on that. But the best thing about it, I guess, is operationally. You think about what this means in terms of how you patch, how you update, applicate. That's the key point here. That make sense? Right, I think we've got about 7 minutes left. I did want to show you one other thing here, which unfortunately isn't me being quite so bad at the demo. It's actually a video, but I'll show it to you anyway. One of the things I wanted to show you here is what's going on now in terms of, let's make this full screen, what's going on in terms of enrollment. So the idea here is the user, so this is a vanilla OEM, could be Windows 10, because Windows 10 is pretty much free now. So the idea is you give somebody a package. You can either enroll via email now, or you can just go into Windows 10 and it says Workplace, and you can put in your credentials and you get enrolled. This one here is just with a package. So you put that on instantly. As soon as it hits the server, it now thinks just like it would be like a mobile phone. It's got a profile associated. So everything you do with a GPO that you would be doing with domain joined, you can now pretty much do with this. So the first thing it did, obviously, as you saw there, was it changed the background to AirWatch. So as soon as you've got it enrolled, now you can do all the policy control. And the scenario here is that you see an app catalog, just like you would do on a mobile phone. It now is the same thing on Windows 10. What it's trying to show you here is Windows 10, if you haven't seen it, is basically a glorified phone in terms of management. There is no real difference about how you can manage a Windows desktop now on a phone. And that's the important thing here, because you're going to see a lot of the stuff we used to do going into how you can manage this bit and seeing the products converge. But the scenario here is that, look, he's pretty much going through everything, all the things you'd know for GPO experts, because everyone goes, oh, can you do this, can you do that? Yes, everything you can do with a GPO, you can do now with this. So it's just kind of going through all the different scenarios and everything you can lock down. I won't go into that too much more, but the other point here is the apps. The apps can be deployed now just like an app catalog. And when you go in, the other key thing is Office 365. We're seeing that a lot more. When you go into Office 365, I think it's showing here that registry editor is now locked down, another policy you can do. It's everything you can do before. But when you go to Office 365, you can now put AirWatch and VIDM in the middle. So if you go Office 365 and you log on, if you're on a corporate-owned device or a non-corporate, there is no real difference. You can't really put a policy around it. Now we can do some basic introspection on the device and go, oh, you're not enrolled on AirWatch. If you are enrolled, then you get prompted to go and put in your RSA token, your two-factor authentication, get onto Office 365, and then you're allowed to use it. So we're kind of building an extra security layer on top of Windows 10 and Office 365, because a lot of people go, oh, yeah, this is AirWatch, I can do that with Intune, I can do that with other stuff. There's a lot of other stuff you can do on top of the basic stuff out the box with Microsoft. But the real key thing here is when I saw this, first of all, I was a non-believer. I was like, no way can you do what I know that I've spent 20 years GPO learning. You can do that with EMM, and you can. And no surprises for guessing who was a close developer in terms of how we then ended up getting this out and working with said people that make the operating system, right? So no surprises there. So real close cooperation. I don't know if you saw, but the Windows 10 security guy who runs that department of Microsoft, he was on stage at VMworld, which he's never heard of. We've never really had Microsoft on stage at VMworld. It's because in end-user computing, we're really close with Microsoft. A lot of people may think we compete, but to coin a semantic term I heard, co-opetition, frenemies, I think they call it. So we work closely with them, but yeah. Times are a-changing. So I've got 3 minutes left. I'm happy for you guys to come along and grab me afterwards if you've got any other questions. There was a couple of slides I just wanted to show you in terms of what's coming next. So 2 slides and I'll let you go. Enzo, we love our internal code names. Have you heard of this? Again, it was announced at VMworld. Actually, it was announced prior to that, I think, around about May timeframe, but we showed what it actually looks like at VMworld. The idea of Enzo is taking everything we've learned over the last 7 years in terms of all the products we've bought, all the goodness of VDI, app publishing, app volumes, profile management, and in effect having that configuration store in what we call a cloud control plane. So the idea is you start off, first go, you bring in a vSAN ready node and or an Evo RAW appliance, you plug it in, you log on, you get like a little screen that comes up and says connect my VMware account. That then goes off to what we call our cloud store. It will then download configuration directly to this Evo RAW appliance or the vSAN ready node. Then it starts downloading some appliances. So there's little Linux appliances get downloaded. And then they automatically get configured. The only things you get asked are host name, IP address, some basic networking questions. and then pretty much within the space of, depending how long it takes to download these appliances, you're up and running and you can start working with it. So none of this full install of app volumes, full install of Horizon, security set, all of this stuff you need to do. This is basically trying to take all of that and configure it on the fly and make it a lot more simple. So it's like Evo Rail, you know, that's supposed to be out the box in 10, 15 minutes. It's that, and then taking the same kind of methodology and doing it for VDI and all the good stuff around Horizon. It's also based a lot on the DaaS platform. So a lot of people say, when is Desktone going to merge with Horizon? This is the merger. This is the DaaS platform in terms of the cloud control plane, because it's multi-tenant cloud scale, and it's also all the goodness from Horizon. So it's, in effect, all of that good stuff coming together. That's Enzo. Expect to see that sometime early next year. There's already an early access program running. Unfortunately, it's locked down, but the reason I'm saying that is because sometimes VMware make announcements every now and again in end-user computing. You don't really see that for a while. This is definitely coming, and it's, you know, we're doing some early testing on it. So I think it's the biggest thing to hit this area for a while. Any idea, I kind of walked through this, but this was the old way of doing it. I say the current model, I should say. It can be, if you don't know what you're doing, quite complex and quite costly. So the whole idea is, let's try and get what we're trying to do here really easy, simple to set up, and the overall management of it to be less than a physical desktop, ultimately, is where we're trying to go. And then the last thing, and I will promise you I will leave you with after that, is where does AirWatch and Horizon ultimately come together? Because probably a lot of people go, you bought AirWatch, you bought Horizon. There is integration, the app catalog sync. You can share content between different pieces. Ultimately, though, if you think far in the future and what I've just said, I think that the way that you deliver applications is going to change fundamentally with Windows 10 and going forward. You won't really have another operating system. It'll just be updates to Windows 10. So if you can manage AirWatch, Windows 10, I should say, with AirWatch, that will do all the base level configuration. And then it will just be a case of delivering the apps on top. Now, the problem you've got, of course, is how do you deliver old apps to the new platform? So with app volumes, we're going to take what you just saw, and we're going to do that, in effect, in a VHD format. If it's VHD, we can separate it away, then we can deliver it down to the end device, attach that VHD locally. So you get all the benefits I've just shown you, but you just do it on physical with Windows 10. So it's kind of an amalgam of what we used to do, plus the AirWatch side as well. And then ultimately, there is an argument to say, do you really need tools like SCCM and everything that I've learned there, Tiris, all of that, all those tools that I grew up with? That whole way of managing desktops is going to be really lightweight and a lot easier to do. So yeah, if you're used to doing that whole desktop management thing that I did, you might want to start learning as well, because this stuff I think is going to be running in parallel for a long time. The good news is I don't think the traditional way would disappear. It's like mainframes, they're still there. They will get smaller over time. I don't think businesses are going to change instantly to the new way of doing it. I think you're still going to have a lot of people doing the same, and that's back to that bridge message I was talking about. You're going to have a lot running in parallel for quite a long time. But the good news is we think we've got tools that can help you get across the bridge. Look at that nice rounding out VMware message I gave you there. So. And I think just about on time there, 2 minutes over. So I'm happy. That was pretty much it now, I think. Apart from this is the everything together, good message, and we do all stuff message. I've got a bit of time for Q&A, unless you want to disappear for some coffee. Was that? I know I went through a lot. There's a lot going on in end-user computing. Does it give you a good kind of view of what's going on? Perfect.
The hardware requirements change for VDIs, like with Horizon 6.2. Do you still need a really high performance storage? That's a problem with VDI that you need to address.
So there's been things to ease that. vSAN has really helped things. You still need to think about your storage. You still need to think about how to architect it. But the good news is all the technology we've brought in, some of those requirements have got less. So it's not quite as costly and complex as what it used to be.
You don't necessarily need flash storage.
I would, well, yes and no. It all depends. It depends on your workload. So it'd be wrong for me to tell you that it just works on all spinning disks. Ultimately, you need to assess what you've got running already. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
We're currently still using legacy products.